If you're a kid and you say, I want to do professional sport, whatever that is, tennis, football, basketball, volleyball, you name it, like your chances to make it are almost zero, right? Like, I mean, every second kid has that dream, right? But you still go and you still practice and you still believe and you still have in your head this like, yeah, I'm going to be Messi. I'm going to be playing Champions League. I'm going to be playing NBA, whatever that is. You have this mentality that although the odds are totally against you, although you know that 99% of people more have failed to get there, you keep going. You keep going there with discipline, with grit, with resilience, with huge effort. Now, if you apply this to most of startup founders, it's really the same.
Hi everyone, very welcome on Aulium. Markus, hi, how are you?
Hi, very good, thanks.
Hi,
how you doing,
Fryderyk.
guys?
Very good, thank you. So today, Markus, we are super lucky because we are joined by Fryderyk Szydlowski. So you are the co-founder of Embargo, one of the fastest growing hospitality tech platform in Europe. Your journey into the industry is anything but conventional, but you've experienced, the beauty and the pain of it. Embargo has quickly become really the go-to tool for coffee places, restaurants, bakeries, aiming to build like a stronger relationships with their clients and grow their sales through smarter loyalty programs and data. So we'll dive into this with you. I can't wait to have your insights and really like to kickstart the discussion for people who are not necessarily in the industry. Would you mind explaining the state of the hospitality market, in the UK, in Europe? A lot of people would know that it was quite impacted by inflation, cost of labor, in the UK, with Brexit, etc. If you could give us like the broader picture and what are like, let's say, like the key macro trends at work, that would be ultra helpful to understand really the value add you have in the space.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for the invitation again. Hospitality has obviously gone through an absolute roller coaster, I think, last couple of years, starting with COVID and then sort of trying to come back after COVID and obviously paying a huge debt afterwards, because I think a lot of the businesses which people don't fully sometimes think about had massive debt to pay back to landlords, to suppliers. And so it wasn't necessarily just the case that, some stats saying, oh, great, some of the volumes are back to what it was before. Well, it sometimes wasn't enough because of the massive losses they made throughout the pandemic. But I think also there's another really interesting, I would say, shift, is how technology and digital solutions are perceived, both by the operators, but also just day-to-day consumers. I think, what hospitality has done, what COVID has done to all of us is to, basically use technology in any sort of consumer business, any sort of setup. We are not worried or stressed by the fact that we have to use some sort of an app, a QR code, and some sort of a digital tool, which on one hand at first seemed like an annoying part of the experience during the pandemic, but I think now today became a bit of a tool. But yes, if you look at just the UK, obviously, particularly with the recent announcements, you had so many changes that significantly impacted those businesses. You had significant increases in minimum wages. You had increases, particularly in London, in the London living wages, putting massive pressure on hospitality. It had always been a business with quite limited or I would say very fragile margins. Obviously, every increase like this adds on. Then you have the impact of Brexit, which is specific for UK, which made hiring much harder. You lost a huge part of your workforce. Students coming from the EU, new basically workers, moving to London, moving to the UK, and very often taking hospitality as one of the first jobs and then turning into a career, which, I've been one of those cases. And you suddenly lose that sort of access to talent, but also most importantly, you also lose access to supply. And I think you almost have this situation where as a business, if you still think you can run it the same way as you ran it for the last 10, 15 years, you obviously start facing massive challenges because the hiring is not the same as it was. The cost of products and just access to products is different because of Brexit implication. And then in Europe, because of the war implication, obviously it made, costs of wheat, of very basic products that most businesses in hospitality use, a skyrocket. And then you obviously had the living wages and the minimum wages go up across Europe as well, by the way. It's not something that only happened here. So suddenly you're attacked from every single part of your P&L and thinking, well, one thing, how I can minimize that impact, how can I cut some costs, or where can I be more efficient? But realistically, where can I make more money? And it's been a really interesting, I would say, industry, because you could also see how people reacted. You had some operators who really wanted to stay and continue doing what they had done, or they maybe wanted to change. They understood, for example, that some locations don't work anymore because, for instance, the way people go to offices changed. So if you had a venue in an office-led area and it wasn't really your typical Canary Wharf office where now most people are back almost 5 days a week, it was maybe Farringdon or somewhere in a more, let's say, creative office-led area, you suddenly realize people were only there 2-3 times a week. So your footfall has changed, but very often the landlords haven't quite adjusted the rents to this, right? So you were moving into this new reality with a setup where the game has changed completely. And there are some operators which were very savvy, very quick to react, took the short-term pain, closed some sites to find new ones which are better suited, adjusted the menus, adjusted the pricing, understood where they can still win and optimize things. Some didn't because they didn't want to, and there were some who couldn't because they were stuck with certain long leases and terms and difficult landlords. So yeah, it's been interesting. But what you also see is it created a wave of new businesses, or businesses who were very small as sort of the pandemic was happening, and really readjusted the business model and the focus and just been scaling like crazy. I mean, there's a lot of brands that, we can mention here, but there are other success stories. It's like something that you sometimes forget by just, reading the news and talking about the closures. There is a lot of success in the industry as well. There's so many new openings. It's interesting, throughout the day or through a week, like we talk to customers. You have one customer talking about how they're now looking for 3 more locations and they want to scale from 7 sites to 10 as soon as possible, or other cases want to go from 20 to 40 in the next 18 months. And of course, the next call is someone having 8 sites and basically closing down and not really being sure where to go next. So yeah, huge challenges, but I also think some opportunities that you haven't seen before, and happy to dive into this throughout that conversation as well.
So a friend of mine, actually he's running like a few restaurants here in London, has described his business as a business where you don't make money, but you need to squeeze money out of your restaurants. Based on what you just described, so a lot of new challenges. Generally speaking, have you seen more places or less places, or relatively the same number of places? But by places, I mean coffee shops, restaurants, etc. In terms of volumes, is it relatively the same, but maybe dispatched in new locations, or in terms of numbers, how has it evolved?
Well, the traction increases, but it's also like, I guess we're somehow biased because we tend to work with businesses who want to invest in loyalty and growth. So they come with a certain mindset, and what you see there, they usually manage to do quite well in that environment. But also there's another thing. Hospitality also shouldn't be treated as one sector exactly the same. You look within that sector at pubs, at high-end Michelin star restaurants, you look at coffee shops and bakeries and grab and go businesses. Every single niche within that has a completely different reality today. Pubs are struggling massively, probably one of those parts of the business which see the most closures. Because it's a very old concept of how people spend time and money. Of course, you still see a lot of pubs full, but it's different than it was before. It's there. You have massive cost pressures at the moment, massive change the way people go out and drink as well. People drink less and less in general, as we know. Then you have the high-end restaurants. People do see massive pressure on their costs. So, it's also the place where, or I would say more premium casual dining, where people think, okay, let me save some money. Maybe I'm not going to celebrate, my birthday, or just because it's Friday, I'm going to go out for a fancy dinner because I need to save money. But then what you see on the reverse is those people usually want to make up for all these big savings with some little treats. So what you see is specialty coffee booming, matcha booming. I mean, buying a matcha in central London today is as expensive as it used to be to buy a pint or a cocktail in a pub a few years ago, right? Like it really is. Of course, the pints now are like £8-9 in some cases, but
what's happening to the world? It's
right. It's changed, but it shows that it's not that people are not willing to spend. I think it's actually what we see in the quick service space. There's a lot of opportunities because there's a lot of people who might save on the big things, might not get a bigger house, might not get a better car, might save a little bit on a holiday here and there. Like find some bigger savings, but on the day-to-day basis, we'll try to make up for it by that specialty coffee, by that
interesting
nice fancy pastry or grab and go lunch. Because if it's £3, £4 or £5 or £6 in one go, it doesn't feel like it's that much, if that makes sense. You think like, oh, if I save £5-6 today, will this really move the needle for me? When you make that quick purchase decision, you're not calculating this, right? You rather look at this £200 dinner with drinks and then whatever a bigger cost. So we see that, and I think you see on the high street a lot of these new brands scaling. Like you think of Blank Street Coffee, you think of like Honey Pokey, like you think of all these businesses just like Gales, like opening side after side after side at the moment, right? This shows a certain trend, and within that trend, there's biggest opportunities than ever. I strongly believe that. It doesn't mean that they don't have cost pressures, living wage pressures. That they are that they have a lot of issues there as well. But I think you can still build super powerful, scalable businesses there.
Oh, very interesting. So you've mentioned tons of different concepts, let's say in the hospitality space. So today, I think you work with more than 3,000 locations, which is enormous. What would you say, from the operator standpoint, what would you say is the thing they misunderstand the most about the market and how it's moving and maybe their behavior to those changes?
Yeah, I would say for sure. I mean, you can almost categorize these people into the ones who had business that were doing well or very well pre-pandemic, and those who almost started the journey a little bit later. Now, with the ones who did very well previously, of course, it's more like adjusting and really realizing and facing the fact that, those times are gone. Like the footfall has changed, people's, spending has changed, people's preferences have changed and what they buy, how they buy. So it's almost like realizing this is really gone. Like don't wait for it to come back. Don't try to do the same thing over and over again that hasn't worked for the last few years, because this will not come back. And we see this. There's some who done super well, as I mentioned, took some short-term pain, adjusted things, and are now back on the growth path. And it's actually super inspiring because, to be honest, I get them. It's hard. Like it's hard to do something, be successful at this. Suddenly the world changes and you suddenly need to adjust and it's almost say, well, everything that got me here is not relevant anymore, or very few things. So I think that's one thing. When it comes to the new ones, they have always had a little bit of an easier life because they could start and build the business from on day one, adjusted to the new reality. But I think that they sometimes forget that you need to, like, you cannot afford to be inefficient. You cannot afford to drop a revenue where you have opportunities to grow. And I think it's also understanding that when you set up a hospitality business and you're super into, let's say, coffee or food or that particular thing you're serving, this will be 5-10% of your business. At the end of the day, it's still a business to run. You still need to really nail operations, marketing, sales, technology, and understand that technology is an inevitable part because consumers expect this. And to be honest, with some outlier, situations and some exceptions to the rule, you can't afford not to use technology to help you in this, because it's almost silly not to. If you have the tools, use them. So I think these are there. But the good thing is you do see a lot of people there learning fast, I think really adjusting. And also it's really cool to see how many new businesses coming up and really getting this and scaling as if almost none of the news that you see all over exist. And it's great. It's super inspiring as well.
So essentially, the bottom line, the conclusion to the question is really like the ones succeeding are the ones who are a bit more agile in some way and at responding to the new challenges, new demands, etc. No, it's quite interesting. So other like maybe not challenges but shifts in the market is obviously like the marketplaces like the Deliveroo, Uber Eats, etc. that have probably really changed the way like first people consume, but on the other hand, how restaurants or coffee places, etc., would interact with customers. How would you say, and how quickly, essentially, I mean, if it's the case, the balance of power shifted from the venues themselves, where they had the entire control, to the aggregator and those platforms?
Yeah, I think it's a conversation I've recently had with a chain of like 15, 20 locations now in London. And a couple of years ago, I mean, you take even the pandemic out because obviously that was a weird time, but even pre-pandemic, there was a moment where I think over 60% of the revenue came from these marketplaces. It was out of control. And it got to a level where it was a business doing so much in revenue but still losing money. And I think it's very tempting to almost enable these channels without thinking, because it's quite straightforward to generate cash flow there and generate revenue coming in. The problem is at what cost. And I always say marketplaces are a very viable way to get out there, to get new customers on board. It should be more a new customer acquisition strategy than your ongoing business strategy, right? And I think like what they built is amazing. It gives restaurateurs extra ways to generate revenue. Now, it's how do you go about this? Like if suddenly they take over and you don't control, you make sure that you don't start putting more effort into making sure that you optimize on those platforms versus how your in-store service looks like, how the products are served in store, whether the venues you have are actually still good venues and good locations, because it's very easy to lose focus and put everything into that. And secondly, there is at what point you realize, ideally from day one, is that there's a certain group of customers and that's majority of your loyal customers. The reason why you actually open a business is to build people who want to come and eat at your venue or drink, the people who care and want to order from you. There are people who will order as long as you give them a way to do this. They don't care if you're on platform A, B, or C. So also making sure that suddenly you don't start promoting to these customers who are just care about you to go and say, hey, why don't you order on that platform? Because that's suicidal. You're actually telling them go and order there. So I pay as an owner operator 30% commission. So I give away your data to that platform so they can then market all my competitors as well to you. And ultimately, their business model is to ensure that you never step into the restaurant again. Every time you step again into the restaurant, they're losing money because they're not getting you to order online. So understanding this and thinking, let me use it to my upside. Let me just try to use it for my new customers and try to reach, like widen my reach, but making sure that all that in-store, all my key customers have ways to always come and visit me. Or if they want to order for delivery, I give them tools through my apps, for a loyalty app, for a website, so they can order in the same smooth, easy to use way. So I can own that relation and own that sales channel. But again, it's also something quite new, which is somehow exciting because these things almost didn't exist like a couple of years ago, or the tech around this or the functionalities were really poor. I mean, you just had your local pizza place or Indian restaurant that you would call up, and they'll deliver it, or they will just leave it for you to pick up. But really, there are now ways that you can build these channels at scale, because otherwise it's very hard to generate revenue. Or you need to make another conclusion and say, I just want to become a dark kitchen. I almost don't care about their location, but then don't have a lease for a high street location where you're paying tons of money if all your revenue goes through a kitchen and no one cares where you serve it. So really being realistic there.
So essentially, it's almost what you're saying is you should almost treat the Deliveroo and Uber Eats like a different type of business. Not necessarily, I mean, what you have like with your location, etc. You should essentially work out like the economics almost separately. And if you start there, you should think, okay, it's another business. I'm still making food, but it's something completely different.
It should be acquisition channel, and it should be something that you really understand. Like, you shouldn't bet your business on this unless you want to be a dark kitchen, because it's very easy to suddenly be fully in their control. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And so maybe like so the market is populated by a lot of very small places and small operators, let's say. I mean, what are the advantage of a small operator in that market versus larger groups, if there is any, really?
Yeah. Interestingly, there are. Obviously, again, you can't invest energy where you can't change things. Like, obviously, you're not going to have the buying power with a supplier. You're not going to, have a massive head office who can prepare strategies and stuff. You'll not have so much maybe cash or capital to invest in things. But the good thing is you can move much faster. It's like in startups and tech startups, right? Why is it that some tech startups can suddenly compete and beat massive corporates? Because they move faster. You don't need to go through 20 different stages of decision making. You don't need all the stakeholders to agree and go through politics. If you see an opportunity, you can go for it, and you can really adjust things. You can try and change things very quickly. You can try something on a menu for a few weeks, try supply. If it doesn't work, adapt this. It's just having the data that can back your decisions. And there are tools at the moment that can give you lots of data, even if you're an SME. And being, again, savvy, I use the word constantly, because as a business owner, whatever you do, whether you run a hospitality business, a startup, you name it, you should be savvy. And I think if you have this, you understand it. Like, my upside is that I can do things, change things faster, look at things faster, and really adapt. Secondly, as well, as if you're smaller, you can still build a much more powerful communities than the big ones very often. Sure, they have the big marketing budget, but they will always be perceived as these big chains, these big corporates. Will always be shortcuts on some costs on everything. You can make your place feel like home, and that's through the traditional, hospitality doesn't require technology as much, but really being the second home for these businesses, which they can never consider, a Nero or Starbucks to be that, right? No matter how much they try, because it's that perception. The last thing as well is you can implement things much faster, meaning if there is some technology you want to try, again, you don't need now to think operation. Oh my God, I need to now launch this as 200 locations across, 2 different countries. You can really go and test these things quite quickly. Sure, that work comes to you as a founder, but still, it's a significantly faster environment. Yeah. And the last but not least, I wanted to mention here is how you choose your suppliers. If you're really big, sure, you have more buying power and negotiation, but there's only certain suppliers who can meet your demands. Here, you can try much more local artisan suppliers who might not be able to produce for 500 locations, but will be able to produce for 5 locations and much higher quality product. And then what it means as well is you should usually get away with charging a little bit more, actually, because people understand that if I'm paying to an artisan business that has an artisan local produced pastry or beautifully made coffee, I usually don't mind paying an extra 70p, £1. It's the prets, it's the other guys who really need to think about the pricing. And at some point they cannot charge a ridiculous amount, because people will be like, why am I paying so much? This is not an artisan locally sourced product. So yeah, there are ways to win.
Okay, and so if you are small, so you mentioned testing new things, etc. I mean, to me, I'm not from the industry, but it feels that testing requires a bit of investment or period of uncertainty. Do you really have essentially the strength to try when you are small? Because, you could try like a new menu for 2 weeks. If that menu doesn't work, then you are essentially losing money for 2 weeks. And then even if you invent a new menu afterwards, it might take time to pick it up. So do they really have that strength to be agile?
Yes, because I think change doesn't always means complete change and redoing the entire menu. Sometimes what it can be very simple is like, look at all your products you're currently selling. Look at the margins you make on them. Look at where are the products that, for example, people don't really buy and they just become a distraction on the menu. Which ones are products that you pretty much make no money on, and which products you could be making money on, but maybe the quality is not good. So what you can do, as an example, I was having this chat with someone who was having a typical coffee shops, pastries, sandwiches, everything sort of, like pre-made. There wasn't a kitchen there, but there was like so many pastries there available, but all of them were quite low quality. The coffee, incredible, one of the best in that area, like really low quality and a massive selection. So what you suddenly had is like adding a very good to a coffee shop, adding a very good selection, high quality of pastries allows you to really win. Because if you're a coffee shop, you cannot hope that that you can serve more people during rush hours, because there's always a few hours a day where you can serve X amount of customers. You can't possibly serve more because there's no space, right? So your game is two things. Is one, obviously optimizing operations and service to maybe sell a little bit more, but really is also driving the average transaction value. The easiest way in a concept like this is to make sure that your coffee drinkers also get something on the side, a sandwich, a pastry. So your mentality is need to think is like, oh, it cannot be that, oh, we're a coffee shop, I don't care about the pastries. No, you must care, because apart from a coffee shop, you're a business as well that needs to make money. So this is an opportunity. And either you put as much effort and as much love to this as you put to the coffee, or you're losing an opportunity to make money. If you don't care, then don't complain later that people are not buying this. So there, the discussion was like, shorten the selection. Think about what is it people really want to do. It's usually between 3 and 4 pastries that people really buy, and source the very best ones. And you can even price them higher, because if they're really good, people don't mind spending, especially in your asset, like you're in an area where you're already charging for your coffee way more than the average coffee shop. So people are willing to spend. Your customer base is not visiting you because you're cheap. They're visiting you because you're quality. Raise this up, and suddenly from a £4 coffee customer, you can start turning that person into a £9 customer who buys also a £5 whatever pastry, or £4.50 pastry, or maybe a sandwich for £9 as well. So this is how you then suddenly win those margins and win that revenue over. But it's about understanding those margins. You can test this. You can really test this for a while, and it doesn't require such a big change, because you can, cut certain things out, choose a few suppliers, redo the menu and the layout. And in 2 weeks, you can see again the data, okay, this is still selling, this isn't, let's adjust that. So it's not necessarily always redoing your entire menu, entire concept. It's small things that make a big difference.
Understood.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now that explains why I always get a pastry when I go to a coffee shop. I've been gamed. But yeah, that makes total sense. And yeah, of course, every business needs to increase basket spend as much as they can. And, you set the scene really well, I think, across the UK and Europe. So just moving on from the wider European and UK market. So it feels quite natural to shift towards Embargo itself. And so would you care sort of explaining just in simple terms what it is that Embargo is trying to achieve for restaurants, coffee shops and bakeries, just for, in a very simple elevator pitch?
I usually like to start with the problem, because I believe that every solution should solve a problem. The problem for us was very simple.
True. Yeah.
Hospitality is one of the biggest consumer businesses in the world. And if you look at any other or majority of the other consumer industries in the world, they do everything in the possible capabilities to know who the consumers are, have ways to communicate with them, drive sales, have direct channels to sell to them, engage with them, and own that relationship, right? You think hotels, airlines, grocery stores, they've all implemented had solutions for years with the way capturing consumer data, and have had tools to engage and sell, and then basically make sure they sell more, because 100% of the revenue is consumers, hence their consumer business. Now you apply this to hospitality, and you suddenly realize that in majority of the businesses, people still walk in, walk out, and majority of the operators still have almost no data of who the consumers are. No ways to communicate with them, no ways to sell, no way to offer a ways for them to buy directly from you online if they want to sell online. They're almost opening every day the store, or multiple stores, and hope it's going to work today, because they would obviously work on the product, on the service, on the branding and the experience. But there's very little going on later on. Now, obviously the big consumer businesses and the other industries have done well, but they're usually dominated by enterprises. It is 70 to 75% SMEs. They don't have the money that Tesco will have to build like Tesco Clubcard, a massive system behind it, or what BA Miles has done. So when you saw obviously a massive shift in the last few days with the big players in hospitality, think Joe and the Juice with their app, and then giving away a free sandwich for £8-9 just to sign up to the loyalty app. Why? So the same way how Tesco Clubcard, BA hotels do, to get your data and be able to not just sell it, they have no upside of selling it, to use it to engage better with you, personalized communication, offer you ways to buy directly from, etc. So you can actually grow your sales from your consumers. And Pret is my favorite example. Pre-pandemic, it was always all about random act of kindness. The CEO would always say, we're never going to do any technology. We don't need it. It was a business serving millions of people that had zero customer data. You just walk in and walk out, right? There's no point at which you will be asked to engage to something. Fast forward now, they're using some of the best teams in the world to build their loyalty apps, subscriptions, communication. They're all digital now, right? And what we ultimately do as Embargo, we go, well, there's the 75% of the market, the SMEs. They make our industry. I mean, this is really, these are the businesses why we love it. This is why we love coffee shops, restaurants, cafes, because you have these cool local brands. I'm not just talking about these single businesses, them as well. There's a lot of cool homegrown groups and chains as well. There's success stories, entrepreneurs. We say, can we empower them with Embargo? And what Embargo is, it's a plug and play loyalty, CRM, ordering solution that has tons of other features around it, so that we can, in a plug and play basis, give you, Thomas and Markus, if you had a coffee shop down the road or a bakery chain, 24 to 72 hours, the technology that Starbucks and McDonald's have. A digital loyalty card that you can use in store for collecting your stamps and points, rewards, a way to order for click and collect delivery directly from your favorite shop, so you don't have to go on the marketplaces. And for the merchants, a powerful CRM system. So for the first time, they go, great, I have X amount of regular customers. Here's who they are. Here's how many have not been back for a month. Here's how many used to visit me 3 times a week, but now visit once a week. And actually very easy, few clicks tools to go, I want to message all of these customers that haven't been back in 2 months and welcome them back to try a new menu. All these sort of tools that these really big corporates, these really big consumer chains have done, whether hospitality or not, initially plug and play. You can go live, monthly subscription, low ordering fees. We want to empower, democratize access to technology. And I think because of that mission, because obviously the pressure is bigger than ever for these businesses, it got us to that 3,000 venues. And it's exciting because it really creates a win-win here. And I think that was from day one. How can create a solution where the merchant wins, the operator really wins, not just gets cash flow and gets a 30% commission at the end of the month. How can the customer win? Because with cost pressure as well, we care to be rewarded. We care to save where we can if we constantly leave our business, our hardly earned money, with our business. And how can we win in the same time to obviously have a business model that's growing and sustainable? So this is what Embargo is today.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so there's some other apps that I've seen around. For example, there's Squid. I don't know if you're aware of that one as well, where you have to scan an NFC chip when you make the order, for example. So how would you say you're compared to a competitor are they a competitor of yours, for example? Or?
Probably they were maybe a couple of years ago when we were offering a basic loyalty card solution. But for us, the game was always bigger. For them, someone like them or a solution offering you a website ordering are sort of semi-competitors who offer that one feature. Here, you mentioned these guys, there's probably 6, 7 other players who do exactly the same. That's fine. They just replace your stamp card. That's it. And then if you have a website, let's say ordering provider, they just do the website. Now, we believe that these merchants need much more powerful solutions. They need to be simple. They need to be easy to use and easy to launch, but they really need to be an all-in-one case. Because if me as a merchant want to drive loyalty, I can't just give someone a digital stamp and that's it. I need to have ways to have powerful CRM and data engine on the back that will tell me what can I do better, to give me tools that can engage and sell more. Tools that can enable within one click an ordering system, which none of these guys have. They can do click and collect, delivery, pre-ordering, catering ordering, to open up and own more sales channels. That, for example, if I want to somehow, overcome the challenge of staff having high wages, is how can I collect tips in a better way directly from my regulars? Most people still want to tip, but it's very hard if cash is gone. Think about this. Historically, how would you tip a barista in a coffee shop or in a bakery or a grab-and-go business? You would say, keep the change. There's no more change because they all are cashless at the moment. Yeah. So because we have this really robust system, we go great. So we now launched a tipping solution as well, where people can tip every time they, collect the points or order or claim the coffee. So it's all embedded in the same system. They realize, look, we need to start launching kiosks as well. So in the fast service, we can do this. So guess what? We launched a software to run self-service kiosk ordering. So it's almost like we want to empower that merchant with all these tools, depending on what type of business they have and their needs, to always own every sales channel, every communication, and have tools to drive more business, rather than just give you like a very limited and sort of like one feature solution that is just there to sort of imitate a tech innovation, but really doesn't change much. Like, and this is the mission. We've seen in that industry a lot. There's been so much tech, but a lot of the merchants and the operators just realize like it doesn't really change that much for me, right? And or I've tried so many things and it's just not that quality, because what you have is, it was always a little bit of an afterthought, a very small product. We believe that hospitality needs what e-commerce has seen over the years with incredible technology, what fintechs have seen in banks and like incredible technology. Hospitality needs this level too. And I think this is now the best time to do it. Yeah.
And so interestingly, so when did you realize, so you mentioned Squid, for example, that's one competitor that focus only on the loyalty side of things. But when did you realize that this had to be more than just a loyalty tool and a wider tool? So you spoke about, this needs to be a much wider solution. When did you make that strategic shift?
I think we've learned a lot about that during the pandemic, when we actually we started just before, and we started commercializing the business literally a few months before the pandemic hit.
Oh gosh.
Good timing.
Yeah, great timing. But it was tough. I mean, we could almost record a separate podcast on that on those sort of 1.5 years. But back then, what I've done is I've decided to buy myself. It's still standing in the office, although it's not working well. I bought myself an e-scooter, and it's literally the same one from back then. And I said, you know what? Let me go around and start talking to operators which still offer takeaway. Basically, I mean, what else do I do? Like, I need to understand what has this experience of COVID taught them. How has the thinking shifted? What do they think? What do they need when things reopen? What do they wish they had previously, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I spent countless hours talking to these business owners, going around London, and really understanding more and more and seeing the shift, how they think, how they use different solutions, how they all started thinking about online digital tools. Obviously, a lot of them just went directly onto Deliveroo, Uber, et cetera, because that was the fastest way. Some thought, let me get a provider to build a website ordering for me. But again, it was all very fragmented. And I thought there must be a way to give them one tool that has it all. It will take time. You can't build this within months. It really has to grow with the needs and how the industry has been changing. But we really believe, look, there's a long-term vision here. We can give a plug-and-play tool that really does everything they need. A little bit what, like e-commerce provides, like someone like Shopify from the more well-known names does. If you want to set up your e-commerce, they can within, in a plug-and-play way, they can give you everything you need to sell more, to engage more, to capture data, like everything. It's not just your store anymore. You just set up on your website, Shopify. That was the core. That was the start. But they had thousands of copy-paste, basically, people doing just that. But why they won? Because they were able to really own the full thing. Even now, up to offering physical POS as well to the shops, right? Because there's a certain mentality that comes with what does my customer need? Fine, I'm currently giving him that one thing, but what else do they need that I can embed in that one solution? Because that would be the dream. So yeah, I think it was the pandemic and how it also changed after it, like how people started adjusting the new norms and listening to customers, generally asking them, what do you need? Like, what is it that you need? And try to build this with obviously some long-term vision in mind.
Yeah, the pandemic kind of blocked those dark years out, but it was a very difficult period, wasn't it? Yeah, interesting. And thanks a lot for explaining, your strategic thought process there a lot more. And I guess, it was maybe useful. It might not have been something that you would have usually done, going and visiting these people that are still delivering or food delivery services. So, face to face. And that's actually really, really something unique that you might not have done otherwise. So I guess in some senses, it's affected your thinking positively and changed the strategy positively. But if I just talk about the shift in your own thinking. So when you changed your mission into this wider concept, so what was it? What was it that defined your product mission, and what lessons from the journey that you've been on would you share for any aspiring founders?
I think it's like, as a founder, obviously, you need to trust a lot your gut. You need to understand that a lot of the success will come down to your skills as a founder, which is reading the reality, seeing opportunities, and applying your skills, unique vision in how you build this. And you need to be quite confident and certain about this. But then mixing it up with those moments where you go like, okay, how do I change it? How do I pivot? How do I adjust this? So it's a very fine line between certainty and confidence in your vision, which you need to do because a lot of people will not believe or think it makes sense for a long time. You need to be okay with this. At the same time, seeing those moments where you need to change and shift. So, I guess we were thinking about the business in during those years where everyone in the tech world was like, do one thing really well. Like every VC just wanted to invest in this, this Uber or this Uber for XYZ. It had to be this one thing you do. So obviously our thinking was like, oh, we want to be this like, Uber for loyalty, let's say, or whatever, right? Because you sort of grew up with this and you have this strong vision, but at some point you need to start reading the game, right? You need to start understanding what else can you do. So find that balance between your strong vision and actually total openness. And somebody's thinking, okay, what if I step outside from my business? What am I seeing? What am I not seeing actually? That could really benefit. What's the long-term vision? And I think this is the second key thing. As much as in the startup world, we always need to think short-term as well, because, there's always X amount of runway you have. There's always some KPIs and targets you need to show. But if you can try every single time, think when you make a decision, cool, is this just serving my end of quarter results? Or is this serving my long-term vision? Because you should never sort of say, I'm going to do something just so that, an investor will tap me on the back. Well done, Q3, great numbers. But it will actually take me further away and distract me from where we're going. So keep that long-term vision. For us, the long-term vision was really owning every product within that merchant. That was the long-term vision. It wasn't that easy to make sure the short-term goals are always aligned, because you had to think long-term and sacrifice stuff. But we stayed with it, we stuck with it. And, today, I think we can be very grateful for that.
So now, we have like a clear understanding of your mission, your vision. So maybe let's spend a bit of time on reality. So what's happening today? Can you maybe describe and give some sort of data on, how your solution is impacting your clients? Maybe not on day one, but what is the impact on, sales or maybe profitability that they could expect once they use Embargo?
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of having a solution that is high, has a multi-product solution, because it also gives those merchants the flexibility how to apply things and what they need for the business. So in some cases, about the sort of coffee shop average transaction value increase. We had this incredible case study recently with a chain of a growing group of 5 specialty coffee shops and bakeries who relaunched Embargo in January. They've seen an over 20% increase in average transaction value since January, since they launched the product. They've done it super well through both first really capturing tons of data of customers and really having them on the app, on the CRM, and then running continuous sort of communication and upselling promotions to those coffee customers to also try actually the bakery products. And I think that was really key for them. And another thing is also allow them at some point to also increase prices of some products while still keeping people back. Because the problem is like a lot of these businesses had to increase prices. The problem is when you increase prices and you just like hope it still works. What if you pre-communicate to these customers, hey, we have to increase because of XYZ, but we'd love to reward you with an even better loyalty system because we love the fact that you keep coming back. You can suddenly offset the sort of bad sentiment or maybe bad feedback, hey, why are you charging me more, with feeling that the customers are looked up. So they not only managed to increase how much people were spending or buying, but they also managed to get away successfully with a price increase. That's one case. We have cases where they would move from another solution, let's say, or some sort of, let's say POS-based loyalty point somewhere sitting there. And after moving to Embargo, they've seen the same customers visiting almost twice as often as before when they were using the previous solution. And I think on the online ordering, that was actually a gelato group. And then another case on the online ordering, we already have customers who managed to generate even up to 60% higher volumes through the loyalty card on Embargo and website for delivery and click and collect than on Deliveroo or Uber Eats. And I think that's also another one. It's like, we finally can give you technology that not in the first month, but after 12 months, perhaps 6 to 12 months, will allow you to start beating your marketplace volumes and start gaining those profits back. So these are the sort of typical case studies we've seen.
What have you learned maybe between growing sales and improving profitability? Because you mentioned that case study where they managed to make 20% more in sales, so a mix of understand of price increase, but also in terms of repeating customers, so also in volume. Can you also help improve profitability? So let's say I'm a coffee place on board Embargo, but I don't want to increase prices. Maybe I will have more repeat. How do you essentially differentiate the two, and how does it impact the two aspects of the business?
Yes, I think first of all, the big profit driver is the fact, maybe not so much for coffee shops, but for food-led businesses, if they can really successfully launch their own ordering channel, if they can even get 20% or 1/3 of the marketplace orders, regain them back through our ordering system, they can save 20-25% on the margins because not having to pay those commission. So this is a massive profit booster on every order. Secondly is the retention. You can almost also understand that if you're a coffee shop or a bakery, your business is not about constantly trying to get new people through the door, because you're not a destinational place. You're not this like Michelin star restaurant where people will travel from the other side of Europe or town to visit you. You're all about community. Your goal is to make sure people visit you as often as possible, not constantly trying to spend money on new ones, because it's hard. I mean, the acquisition cost will be way too much for the ticket and the spend you'll have of that customer, because they're buying bread and coffee. They're not spending money on wine and fancy food, right? So if we can then come in and bring you a tool that can increase your revenue without having to spend money on tons of ads and marketing and any sort of ways where they're currently often leaking the budgets because they start boosting pictures of the coffee on Instagram, hoping that this will drive business, we can say no, stop spending money there. Let's really focus on that community here to keep coming back more often. Because if the same customer who used to visit once a week visits twice a week, that's actually twice the revenue, right? But without having to spend money on constantly trying to acquire new ones. So this is again how you can really boost those profits.
Makes sense. I mean, you see tons of different metrics like for like those places. If you had to pick one metric that would best predict the success of a hospitality business, maybe like 1, 2, 3 years down the road, what would that be?
I mean, one of them will definitely, okay, I'm quite biased, but I think one of them will be definitely the retention metric. It's like, do you need to constantly have new people coming through the door to keep your volumes, or is this really retention? And why I talk about this, because it's very easy in the first 3 years to think things are great, although you're totally leaking. Because like, let me give you an example. Sorry, I like to do visually. Imagine that this cup is your shop, right? And you need to fill it with water, which are customers, right? Look, in this bottle, there will be X amount of customers who live within your vicinity, or you can reach within your budget, basically, right? Now, so you still keep pouring. Now, if you pour it and it's full, you don't need to keep spending money. It's there. It's amazing. Your business is full. If it's leaking, you might keep actually pouring, and you stay full for a year, for 2, but it keeps leaking. And there was a moment when you run out of money or run out of people here. And then for another maybe 6 months, you stay full, and then suddenly the water will drop out. Does that make sense? And this is what happens with a lot of restaurants. There's a cool metric, if you want to talk about metric, is that I believe what it was is that 90% of businesses in hospitality, it was pre-pandemic, but I think it's very similar probably now. I think it was like almost 90% of businesses who managed to stay 5 years or longer on the market were staying for 10 years or longer. So it's about, can you really build that retention and not just die within the first 3 years to really get there? I think that's massive. And the second most important will be, how much do you rely on marketplaces? How much of your business is literally fully in their hands? And with 30% commission, no access to data, no control. If it's too high, it's going to be hard, very hard.
Yeah, just jumping in very quickly, because you mentioned something very interesting there. So I think that's applicable to any business, really, is, I mean, with Joe Resolve, so the first business, which I was involved in for 7 years, we had one smash hit product, but then we weren't able to, come up with new products that had the same level of retention. So it kind of, arrived at a certain point, but then never really went much further than that. So we couldn't scale it more. So I would almost say that that's one of the main metrics for any successful business, right? The retention metric. Would you agree with that? Is that kind of the main one that you would look at?
Yeah, 100%, especially for, I would say, these grab and go community businesses, right? Of course, if you're a Michelin star restaurant, you can't really hope that people will keep coming back every week, right? You need to constantly get new people through the door. Like that's literally your job is constant customer acquisition. But yes, if you grab and go coffee, bakery, poke bowls, pizza, burgers, like it's literally retention is the king here.
Good. And so maybe like let's dive a bit more into your own personal journey. So I mean, you are running tech business in the hospitality space. Could you walk us through a bit of your journey and how you end up where you are today? I mean, I know you spent quite some time in the industry, really on the ground. So I mean, if you could maybe describe essentially the journey,
Sure.
that would be interesting.
I mean, one other thing, even before my hospitality, career or journey started, that really shaped me, I think, and perhaps led me to eventually starting a business is the fact that as a kid, I would be super into sports. I grew up in a family where my dad would look after great athletes, specifically in track and field. So let's say, top level sports was in my family from from since I remember. And I was actually a teenager. I ended up playing professional basketball in Europe. And I think, what I learned now in hindsight is that, if you're a kid and you say, I want to do professional sport, whatever that is, tennis, football, basketball, volleyball, you name it, like your chances to make it are almost zero, right? Like, I mean, every second kid has that dream, right? But you still go and you still practice and you still believe and you still have in your head this like, yeah, I'm going to be Messi. I'm going to be playing Champions League. I'm going to be playing NBA, whatever that is. You have this mentality that although the odds are totally against you, although you know that 98% of people more have failed to get there, you keep going. You keep going there with discipline, with grit, with resilience, with huge effort. Now, if you apply this to most of startup founders, it's really the same. The amount of people who have an idea or think like, oh, we want to start this or even beta launch a business, whatever. I mean, gazillion, right?
Mm.
Now, your odds are totally against you. I mean, how many make it past year one, past year two? How many raise around? How many get the first customer or I don't know, hit $1 million ARR, whatever that is? Almost none. But still,
And
you're
survive
totally
COVID as well.
convinced. And then you have COVID as well. Like, but you go there and you wake up every day and go like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. You almost have the same mentality as that kid picking up that ball or picking up their tennis racket every single day and be like, I'm gonna make it. And I think that was a big part of what shaped me eventually and got me to actually, I guess, being crazy enough to start a business. But yeah, in terms of hospitality, I mean, I moved to London for uni. There was a moment where I was 19. I was about to go to my second pro season at top division, and in Poland back then. And I was like, okay, do I continue now? Do I now spend the next 15 years playing basketball professionally? I mean, subject to obviously injuries and any success there or not. Or do I change something and really now focus on this? I thought it's like the last moment. And I just felt I want to change. Like I've done a lot. I've achieved a certain goal, a certain dream. But I felt I need something else. I guess that was something that was growing in me for a while. So I moved to London, and then it was quite coincidental when it comes to hospitality. I just need to get a job ahead of my basically uni starting because I had to pay for my rent and for my life. And as a 19-year-old, I mean, there aren't that many jobs you can choose from to work. And I walked into Joe and the Juice in Regent Street in the Oxford Circus. Back then, they only had 4 locations, and yeah, it looked like a great place. I had no idea about what the brand is, but it looked awesome. There's a really cool guy there behind the bar. And, I told him, look, I'm looking for a job. And he was like, you know what? We are hiring at the moment. Like, hey, email here. And I think, a few weeks later, I was interviewing with one of the co-founders, like actually the cousin of the original chairman, CEO, and founder. He was the country manager for the UK, which was also awesome. And they were like, they're still a startup. It was so cool to see Joe and the Juice back then. Obviously now preparing for almost a $2.5 billion IPO. And I just fell in love with it. Like to see how it works, and particularly in a brand like Joe and the Juice, which was so innovative and different, and that everything about it was so exciting. And I think that's where I fell in love. I mean, look, maybe if I joined, a different hospitality business, I wouldn't, fall in love
So
so much. But yeah.
maybe there, like, what have you learned from people, because you were really like like first line with the customers. What did you learn from people, and some lessons you managed to use while building Embargo?
First of all, the product is one thing, and it needs to be great, needs to be special, like whatever you're serving. Like there's no discussion there. But what's even more important and can even win customers over if your product isn't that great, or maybe isn't that much better or different than others, is how do you make people feel? They need to really understand what is the angle here. For Joe and the Juice, it was a certain music, a certain ambience, certain employees they were hiring, certain ways they would talk to customers. But what is it? How do you make people feel? It's still hospitality. And the third thing was, to me, what I learned. I mean, apart from general learning that hospitality is not an easy job, and I think everyone should work a few shifts in their life anyway as part of their upbringing. But I think another part was it's all about building habits or changing people's habits. And I give you an example. Now, Joe and the Juice was always known, particularly in the UK, for a juice bar.
Mm.
But they were actually serving very good coffee, much better coffee than your typical chains. It wasn't maybe like top-notch specialty in terms of the beans, but the training on the latte arts, everything was like top-notch. But a lot of people would still walk in. I was actually working the one on Kings Road in Chelsea in London. They would walk in with a Starbucks cup and ordering the juice. So and they would do it over and over again because there was a Starbucks literally next door, and you could feel it's just a habit. It was a habit. The juice, this part of making people feel special. We remembered what they were ordering, but then it's like, can you impact that habit? Because once you impact it, you suddenly change it. So what I implemented there on the back of my own idea, which no one signed off, I would tell a person working with a Starbucks cup and ordering the juice, say, look, I'm going to make you a coffee. I'm not charging you. I'm going to make you what have you ordered? I don't know, oat cappuccino. Great. I'll make you an oat cappuccino right now. If it's better, right? You're taking it, you're throwing away that Starbucks cup, and tomorrow you're coming and you're ordering one and you're paying for it. You don't have to pay for this one. If not, don't worry. There you go. You have a free coffee. The amount of people we converted was just insane. And we would do this. We'd literally say, hey, there you go. But if it's better, you're coming tomorrow and you're ordering a juice and a coffee. And suddenly these people realized this was generally better. And they said, oh, actually, it saves me a trip and standing twice in a queue. Why not come here? And it taught me to do
If I knew that, I would have been camping with a Starbucks empty Starbucks cup.
Would recognize you, you know? And I think that was the thing, is changing the habit. But I think now in hindsight, when we build a product as well, is actually a customer wants ideally to get, if they can get good quality, better quality, they want to get it from one place. So same thing with us. If we do loyalty as the core, but if we build a kick-ass ordering system for delivery, click and collect, they'll take it from us because they trust us, they know us, they'll keep using it from us. But obviously it needs to be good, right? So yeah, I think these are the key sort of learnings.
Okay.
Yeah. That's definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, the results make even more sense when placed against the backdrop of your own journey as well. So the origin of Embargo, because that was rooted in a very real hands-on experience. As you were mentioning also during COVID, for example, it makes sense to look at maybe a bit more of your personal experience and the origins. So you mentioned you moved to London for university. Is that right? So So after your, you mentioned you had your path where you went through John Juice. Is that kind of what ended up driving the idea behind Embargo, that experience?
It created some roots, but it probably wasn't there yet. After I was studying and working during the Juice, and I was working full time, just again to make sure that back then the minimum wage for a 19-year-old was £6.50 an hour gross. So you had to work a lot of hours to make enough money in London. I then ended up actually getting an incredible chance to join a marketing team of a business that was running a bar, a restaurant, a club, and then a few other things. The founders met me through mutual friends and an event. They gave me a chance. They added me to the marketing team. It was something completely different because I went from frontline and maybe like a training manager to actually being part of the marketing team and seeing how does a P&L look like, where do we grow sales, how does marketing look for a hospitality business. And that was really like another really mind-blowing experience because you went much deeper, and I really loved it. And that was actually when I dropped uni because I didn't have time anymore. I had to decide, do I go full-time or do I keep studying? I decided to drop uni. I continued there. 6 months later, I was actually given a head of marketing role just a few months after my 21st birthday, which was massive for me. Huge responsibility. Had no idea what I'm doing, but I would have thought I've earned my place there. And then even more, I had a revenue responsibility of a hospitality business that was making quite a lot of money, and it was on the 21-year-old. And that's when I started to be exposed on the lack of tools. Because I was a head of marketing of a consumer business who had pretty much no consumer data, no tools to engage, communicate, retain, drive sales. There's so little actually I could do in terms of, really measure things and act on things. And this started, and even back then, I wasn't thinking about building anything. I started to look into solutions, implement them and try them. And then with every solution, I was growing a bigger frustration, like I'm sure a lot of operators did as well. And it was around then when I met my co-founder, who then was actually investment banking, and we started talking about his thoughts and his experience with working with big consumer businesses and the investment banking side, and his few thoughts and ideas on this. My experience of basically not having any tools to really even know how many regulars we have or communicate with them or drive them back or do anything. And then that really was sort of where it came, you know what, someone needs to do it well. We knew there is a graveyard of solutions who try to do these things. We knew there's a few of these players that are coming and going, but we strongly believe there is a way to build a very powerful business out of this, because no one has done this for me successfully.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So I'm just conscious a little bit of time. So I'm going to move on to the next section of questions that we had, which was all about the go-to-market and the sales funnel and the buyer behaviors. Once the product foundations are clear, it becomes easier to explore how you take it to market, right? So operators and how operators respond when they first encounter it. So what's kind of your traditional journey at the moment from a venue hearing about Embargo to being fully live and then using it all the time? How do they hear about you? And, are you doing door to door? What kind of marketing strategy are you using?
Yeah, so door-to-door is almost non-existent, although when we started, we had to, because, we had no database, we had no name, we had to go out there. But I think, currently it's predominantly online sales. So it's, there's parties which is outbound through emails, through social media, direct, a little bit of calling, but that's quite limited because you don't have actually that many people ready to pick up calls during service. And another one is obviously inbounds, which is generated through the fact that 3,000 things use it, so they start seeing it. We start being recommended by businesses, and obviously some marketing and B2B ads. So we try to obviously reach our customers as well, not just by messaging them, but also appearing on their stories, on their social media, showcasing case studies, showcasing how we helped other similar businesses, because we strongly believe it's the best way to prove that it's worth looking into this. Like, we are not someone who is just trying to prove something. We've shown how we can impact someone's business, but we've done this for thousands of them. So this was really key. And then I think go to market is constant day-to-day adjustments and changes, and based on the products you launch, based on the environment, based on the metrics you gather. But then once someone actually says, cool, I'm interested, they can either see an online demo or they can book an online demo with our team, and then they can onboard. To be honest, our fastest launch, I think, was like something like 18 hours from when they said, cool, here's all the information that we need to launch, to being live. But typically it's between sort of 2 and 3 days.
Great.
From when they say, cool, we're doing it, here's all you need. We will ask them for some very basic information. Some of them we can preload from the online channels, and then it's a matter of a few days. And that's the idea. We want to make it super easy, because these operators don't have time. They are always short staffed. They don't have big headquarter, like offices with tons of people. It needs to be easy, simple. And that's what we try to always keep in mind.
And what do you know about selling into hospitality specifically that you didn't know before you started this process?
First of all, you really need to speak the language. Like, you need to understand the challenges. I think someone coming from the outside, not knowing anything about or very little of how the day-to-day looks, is quite hard, because you're speaking from...
So you think your personal journey essentially made that possible? So if you hadn't gone through Joe and the Juice, like your different marketing position within other hospitality businesses, would have been super hard or even not possible at all?
Well, I think it would have been harder. I think it allows you to understand simple things. Is like, if you at the beginning do some door to door, like when you just started, well, make sure you don't walk in during rush hours, because you'll piss people off, right? When saying that, oh, this is easy, but actually, really, if you think about this, it's not easy when you're a manager owner who needs to do everything. Then don't say it's easy, because people will get really pissed off. Understand what the day-to-day looks like. Understand also that they don't work off a calendar and they sit in the office and go from, Zoom call to Zoom call or whatever. They are very often on the field, or a little bit in the office, a little bit in the field, a little bit dealing with, some, I don't know, a delivery not arriving or staff member calling in sick and they have to step in. And this happens not just at very small businesses, even for businesses that have 10, 15, 20 sites. So really understanding that you need to be a little bit more patient, understand a little bit more how the day looks like. That's one thing. Second of all is what will trigger the interest. Just talking about, we have this incredible loyalty CRM system and that's it, and you should join, is not enough. We should, first of all, show them ideally proof that it has worked in other similar businesses. That's what they care. They have, as you said, there's certain things they can test, but there's also certain risks that they don't have endless time to test things. So they want to see it work somewhere. Second of all is what can it do? Like, what is a pain point they can potentially solve? Of course, that's basic sales, but I think there's in certain very tech-led businesses, you talk a lot about the features and the products and how crazy tech is. Here, they don't really care about you constantly using, this is AI-driven, this is cloud-based, whatever. They want to know why it will work and make their life easier or better. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. So if you were to boil that, would that be the one thing, if you had to boil sort of one piece of advice for selling into hospitality, would that be your main piece of advice?
Yeah,
selling in?
Put yourself in their shoes, in the lack of time and how hectic the day-to-day looks like and the pain points they go through every single day. Put yourself in shoes and then think about how you would like to be sold and talked to when you are in their shoes.
Got it. So maybe like on the... So like setting up the business and you need to think about financing. And you told me essentially your philosophy about getting finance. So you are like a very fast growing business, but you are not following, let's say traditional, I don't know if it's traditional, but like the VC route where you raise, you burn as fast as you can, you raise, you burn, you raise, you burn. You explained to me essentially that it's more about you raise and then you have like a strategy to become profitable within the next 2 to, let's say, 4 years. And then you'll think again about, raising. You recently closed the round, if I'm not mistaken, but, maybe did you have that essentially your philosophy in mind from day one, or is it something that came up maybe like through your various experiences with the business?
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that obviously we learn on the way. I'm a first-time founder, realistically, so you learn about this. I mean, before you just read about these big rounds and the VCs, and you go into the business thinking that might be your journey as well. I think at some point you also understand that not every playbook matches your team or is best for your business long term. Now, I think this setup works great, for instance, for at least sort of one feature solutions, at least at first, where you can just put all money into this one thing and you just go for it. If it dies, it dies, or it goes crazy. I think for us was two things eventually that we learned. We believe that we built certain value at some point, which would be so silly to burn just because you're going to burn it too fast. If that makes sense. Sure, you need to grow fast. You need to show, you cannot grow 10% year on year, right? Like you need to go for it. But how can you somehow always try to keep that the path to profitability there? Like, how can you make sure they don't just go with like a headless chicken just for it and see if it works out? Because we build this value, we do believe that in long term it can really work. Second of all, is understanding that if we think it's the multi-product approach, the all-in-one, best in class, then this will take time. It will not be this typical journey where you go from zero to billion, pound valuation within 2-3 years, right? Like it really will take time, because you cannot build good products very fast, because otherwise they will not be great. They're not going to be good enough. So we learned this, and I think it's this hybrid. We're not bootstrapped. We have financing. We're now burning money, but we're also not like that. We need to, for example, we don't have we just raised $3.5 million, but we don't need to now go like, okay, if we now want to really move to the next level and survive, we have to now raise a 10 million round in 12 months, right? Or whatever. No, we could, if we really want to optimize it towards profitability, or we can go a little bit faster and know that we can add another round on a high valuation and a little bit, but we don't need to be bound to this. So sadly, what it means, we don't need to optimize our business towards the next 6 months and just that to make sure that, we tick all the VC boxes. We can really constantly think about the long term. And that allows us to then do. And I think then getting the right investors who understand this, because if they don't, again, you have this conflict, because the investor wants one thing and you think there's a long-term vision.
I was going to ask, based on that philosophy and strategy and the way you want to run the business, essentially maybe your time horizon is a bit longer. So you are building this for a longer period of time, let's say. Essentially your own, let's say, investment horizon is a bit longer. So what did you learn about selecting investors, maybe finding them? How did you make sure that they were aligned with your own vision? Was it something you were extremely clear about, when you spoke to them? I understand you raised mostly with angels, so people amongst them, like some people who are extremely successful at building businesses, etc. I mean, what did you learn in terms of relationship with those people?
I think, as a first-time founder, you often read stuff on LinkedIn, how to get your first investors, VCs, put in what do they want to hear and all of that. And I guess, it's stop telling people what they want to hear. Tell them about your business, your vision, and how you see this. And what they will do will attract the right people. Because if you're saying things just to sort of slightly adjust to their thesis and make them like you a little bit more because of that, it will always come out sooner or later, right? They're not silly. I mean, sure, there are histories where people get away with a bit of, BS, but let's say, sooner or later, most people will feel it, and it will not feel genuine, and you'll not feel passionate about this. But also what you do is, even if you were to get away with this, you attract someone who has different expectations to where you think the business should go. And this, but whilst where you go really with how you see this, where you see this, and be very loyal to this, you will eventually, there's enough people out there, enough investors with different views on stuff, they will align with this. Of course, I mean, your numbers, your product needs to be good, right? But in a way that you will attract people who think as similarly as possible. You can't always get it right. There will be people who at some point might not align, but you maximize the chances. And I think for us, we have some funds, but not typical VC funds. They're more I would say family office / sort of private funds of people who build businesses, sold them, exited, and now invest through a vehicle into have a full portfolio and a team. But they are very much ex-entrepreneurs, sort of driven investors, all typical angels. And I think that really worked for us. I'm not saying we had a term sheet for our recent round as well. And, these things we get as well. But I think you always need to look at that moment, who's your best partner for the next part of your journey.
And so you often hear if there is money on the table, you should take it and as much as you can. What would be your piece of advice for a founder, going for a raise? Should that person go and raise a maximum amount of money, or should that person try to maybe stay lean, etc.? I mean, I guess it also depends on the business itself, but generally speaking.
Yeah, it really depends on the business. I think it's just, you need to think wider. You need to think, okay, well, how much am I giving away with this round? And I think on a pre-seed level, I sometimes find founders saying, I want to raise my 2 million pre-seed. And I'm asking why? What do you need this money in the first 12 months to raise this? Because the problem what you'll have is you'll get a lot of, if you want to raise 2 million pre-seed, you probably need to raise it at least 10 million valuation, right? Pre-money, more or less. So you don't give up suddenly 1/3 of the business on your first round, maybe even high valuation. Now you need to have conversations. You're in Europe, you're not in the US. A lot of people will say, well, you're just and let's say you're not some sort of AI wonder. You say, where's this valuation coming from? Right? How do we look at this? Are you a second-time founder? No, you're not. So we don't have the conviction yet that we can give you 2 million on a 10, 20 million valuation just because you're a second-time founder. So I will tell them is don't waste so much time, because this will be such a draining thing. Think about what's the minimum you need to raise. Add maybe 10, 20% on top of that. Yeah, to have a bit buffer. If you over raise a little bit, great. But don't go out there saying, I want to because it would be nice, because I can right away with 2 million do this, and that. Sure. But what is the minimum? And add a little bit on top, because you raise it quicker. And you also will keep yourself more accountable to your plan. Because realistically, again, unless you're some deep tech, heavy R&D product, you don't probably need the 2 million on day one. You can start with 1 million or CK and get it off the ground, show some first product market fit or some, any early traction, and then maybe raise again. on different terms, on different sort of understanding different metrics. Hope that answers your question as well. But yeah, I think it's the most practical way to approach this.
It does. So yeah, we've spoken about like financing. So another like big pillar, like in any sort of business, are the people. So you are based between London and Poland because you are fully Polish, or just?
I'm actually, well, I was born in Hamburg in Germany,
Okay.
but I moved to Poland when I was 7. My parents are Polish, so yeah, I am half German, half Polish, but probably more Polish.
Okay, so but you have like teams essentially in London and in Poland. How do you make that work in terms of culture, maybe your connection amongst people? Are they working completely in different silos, or I mean, how do you work out like the culture, etc.?
Yeah, so I mean, look, Poland was a bet for us very early on because I really believe the country is like almost was like just there before it skyrockets, and which it currently does. I think it's probably one of the most talked about, like, economic wonders and growth journeys in Europe. So we really took a bet quite early on, and it's paid off because we absolutely love the growth here and how things are happening. Actually, our culture, I think the culture we've built from day one in the UK office has always been, put on that sort of grit, resilience, and working hard and moving fast. And I feel like it's something that a lot of people in Poland are born with. I think if you think a typical Polish person, even in the UK working, you usually think of them as people who are quite hardworking, resilient, grit, like, street smart, intelligent, get shit done. Excuse my French. And I think it just really resonated because we already had that culture. There's certain teams that work in somehow in silos, but what we do, for example, like, obviously have 2 separate small sales team, one that is on the ground in Poland that sells their one in the UK. So, for example, every month we try to bring them and we do cross-country sales meetings, calls where both teams talk about the wins, the challenges, some strategies they implement that work really well, the experience, so they can learn from one another. Because although the countries and the markets are a little bit different, there's really cool things they can learn. So I think it's good to give people certain, like, you can't always create a structure and apply it everywhere, copy paste and hope it's going to work. Every area, every city, every country, every team will be a little bit different. It will have different dynamic. But put them together so they can learn from another and also connect, because I think that's super
So
valuable.
what have you learned, let's say, I don't know if it's the hard way, but what have you learned about like the differences between the two mentalities? I mean, what's good with, let's say, UK mentality? What's good with Polish mentality? What's bad? I mean, what have you learned like working between the two geographies?
I think, in Poland at the moment, obviously, that there's a economical growth, there's momentum. I think people are quite excited. Even the ones who tend to complain, they still actually feel like things are happening. Obviously, in the UK, the sentiment at the moment is like even business will do well. You read so much negative news around, obviously, the UK economy. So I think there's a bit of difference there. But in terms of the market, for instance, like what we really like about Poland is that you have so many homegrown chains or groups of these, like, I discovered these chains of 50, 100 location bakery chains, which I've never heard of. But they're just in one part of Poland, let's say, and they've been built, it's now the second generation doing them. And you don't really have that much of these businesses actually in the UK. You have pub groups, which are old and, homegrown, but a lot of the quick service businesses that are 50 plus locations are, American chains and a handful of UK, but it's not that many. You have way more there. So you have this entrepreneurial sort of spirit, really, you can feel it. And you have a lot of the new businesses coming to the market, opening.
So that you can
aggressive.
feel it within the actual people composing the Embargo team. So the Polish will tend to be a bit more entrepreneurial in some way than.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, UK still is very entrepreneurial, but obviously it's also been driven very much by a lot of Europeans coming there. And I think sort of bringing that. No, I mean, look, there's so many great British entrepreneurs. So I don't want to say they're not entrepreneur, but I think you have this certain, look, it's a country that hadn't had independence for many years and hadn't had any growth for many years. It was devastated and all of that. So I think it's this feeling of like, oh, we can finally breathe. We can really do it. I think, obviously in the UK, that the country has always been very, very wealthy and they were doing fine. And it's a different mentality. Like, I think Poland's mentality, we finally have our shots, But on the other hand, though, the UK market is significantly, like, a lot of operators they've gone for a lot when it comes to technology. Like, they would have tried a lot of things already. Like the sort of implementing technology in hospitality started much earlier than in Poland. So you have sometimes a bit more like a slightly different conversation. They would have gone through different solutions already. In Poland, you have a lot of the people that haven't tried things yet, but they're very keen and savvy to do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing is people in Poland just love in general technology. Like, you know, you look at the Revolut numbers, how they grow there, right? You look at the food delivery apps, how they grow there. It's insane. The savviness is ridiculous.
Yeah, so that's really, really helpful insight. And moving on to maybe more around just a few lessons from a leadership perspective and founder mindset. So that's always nice to have on podcasts like this, I think. If you had to describe your leadership style today, how would you put it into words? And how would someone describe you who's worked for you before?
I think just leading by example, like, and I really mean this in a way that I always say, I don't expect anyone to work as many hours as I do, or put as much effort. Like I can't tell people to work hard if I'm not working. I cannot tell people to be, to care if I don't care, right? So I think really is that I want to, by all means, lead by example, and I try to work with this thinking of like, okay, all eyes on me. Every action I take has an impact of how people will act when I'm not around. Second thing is like I love to grow people and coach people. I strongly believe is that, if someone joins our team, doesn't matter whether it's a junior or more senior position, like my goal is to make sure that whenever they leave or whatever, in a year or two, or even if they stay, like it will be day and night between how they work, what they can do, what they're capable of, how the CV looks like, how the career can change. So I think, some of our best and most important people on the team are people who we hired from working in a restaurant as after uni, let's say, and we brought them in as a junior salesperson or customer success manager, and then an hour key players in the team, and their life has changed, their CV has changed. If they went on the market right now, the offers they would receive, I mean, a lot of them get headhunted anyway. It's completely different than when they joined 2-3 years ago. So I think this is something like I want to grow you. I want you to be just another level person, because it's both of my own, I guess, mentality, and I love seeing people grow, but also because I strongly believe that we can only grow very fast if our team and every person in the team grows very fast, because they make the company grow and move fast. So if they're not developing, then we won't develop much either.
Fantastic. And how do you prioritize? So when things get noisy, what principle or habits help you decide your focus? I mean, you mentioned like the fact that you expanded the strategic focus for the platform, for example. So, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with focus versus noise?
I think first of all, it's always coming back from all these things. What will impact our long-term value? Like what's important? Are the things that maybe are very noisy because we're trying to optimize to the short term? That's one thing. Second of all is I believe in structure, processes, and efficiency, but I will never take process for the sake of having a clean and perfect process and structure over reaching targets and moving fast. So for example, if you then look at your calendar and you go like, look, all these calls, all these processes that we have are just to make it super clean and avoid mistakes, but actually they're slowing us down. We need to strip things. We need to cut things, and we need to get rid of that noise, right? If we want to have a call every month or every week just to go over this because we have the structure, but we feel like, look, for the next couple of weeks, we need to strip that because we need to really focus. We need to be able to do that. The sort of perfect structure and process can never be more important than the goal we want to achieve. Yeah.
So it's better done like, broadly well than perfect, essentially. And speed is the key.
100%. I think even the founders of Stripe said that it's like speed of execution and shipping is so much more important. Like you will always beat your competitors if you can ship fast and iterate very fast. But you just need to remember not just to ship it and leave it, but ship it, iterate. It's from the outside, it looks very messy, or something's like, oh, why are you doing this? But actually, you look back in a year and you are like miles ahead of everyone else in the industry.
And so maybe like to close not down this, but if to finish the conversation, what would be, if you had to pick one specific lesson, you're talking to a founder, what would be the main lesson you've learned? Something you've done extremely right or something you missed completely? What would be the best lesson that you've learned so far?
So get inspired by other people's journeys and lessons. But remember, yours is completely different. There's no one that can tell you how to do things, and you should never take anyone's advice copy paste. Like be certain about your vision and your journey, and the rest is just noise. You can listen to it, or you can look how it impacts certain things, but you need to be certain. And I think that's especially important when you're a first-time founder, because later I think you learn it and you're quite confident about these things. But at the beginning, you read something on LinkedIn, and you're like, oh my God, why I'm not doing this? But you realize it's out of context, and it might not apply to your business. So you have your own journey, and it's totally fine. You don't need to make everyone happy. You don't need to have everyone every day tell you how great you're doing things. They might say, I disagree. It's all about how it will work out at the end. Until then, it doesn't matter.
Super insightful. But thank you very much, Fryderyk. Markus, thank you. I mean, it was a pleasure to have you, really, Fryderyk. Learn a lot about like the hospitality business, which was absolutely amazing. So thank you very much. And I hope we'll have you soon enough when you sell your business for 10 billion in the very near future.
At least. Well, it's a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. It was awesome. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.